prompted you to want to run for school board?
Well, I knew I wanted to be a teacher from the time I was in kindergarten. So then I went to Ball State, became a teacher, and taught for 4 years, and now I'm a stay-at-home mom. And I've always had a passion for public education and seeing, what's going on in our community and the decisions being made. It was important to me that our school board remains nonpartisan, and using my heavy background in curriculum and instruction, I wanted to be a part of that.
And describe you said you taught for 4 years. Did you, I think I remember from your bio, you taught in Chicago for a time and then came and taught here, or did you move here?
So I taught at Prairie Vista my first year out of college. I moved home from Ball State, and then my husband and I got married, and he went to school in Chicago, to law school in Chicago, and so we moved to Chicago, and I taught at, it's called Dewey School of Excellence on the south side in Englewood, and I don't know if you're familiar with Englewood, but it was one of the most violent neighborhoods in Chicago in terms of gang violence and drug violence, murder per capita, and everything like that. So I taught there. In my first year, I had 39 students with no teacher's aide. I taught 4th grade.
Wow.
And so I think PHM truly is trying to do the best they can for students and teachers, and I've been at a school where that's not always the case. And I want to make sure that PHM continues to be the gold standard of public education in the state of Indiana.
Yeah, and it as having seen that, having experienced that in Chicago, and probably lack of resources.
Yes.
PHM has a lot of resources to spend, and they're able. They just sent a flyer out that said, we've maintained the lowest tax rate in the county for a lot of years. They've, the superintendent and administrators have talked about this for several years. How is the district able to continue doing that, having that low tax rate, while still doing big projects and still having smaller than those classrooms that you experienced class sizes? And what would you do as a board member to sort of maintain that?
Well, I think we're lucky that PHM, we have a community that is very involved and that is able to help fund some of these things in terms of PTOs at schools and fundraisers. When I was in Chicago, we didn't have all of that. We didn't have a PTO. We had a couple parents that tried to help. It was just a different setting. So we have a community that's always on board to help as much as they can. And when you have that, it makes it easier to lean on that support. We also have the PHM Education Foundation. They are constantly giving grants to teachers to bring, I know last year they did a STEM grant that got teachers, I want to say it was at Horizon, things for their, a STEM program. And so we lean on those supports as well to ensure that our school is going above and beyond.
What do you feel about the board transparency as it exists right now, and how board meetings are run, and maybe how the district do you feel like PHM administration is being transparent? Do you feel like the board is being transparent? And how do you feel that the board meetings are run?
I feel like they've been as transparent as they can. There's always room to improve. I like seeing people ask a lot of questions before just voting on something, and that's a tradition that I hope to continue. In terms of how they're being run, I think it gets really hard because a lot of people in the community want to come and not necessarily air their grievances, but one person on the board has upset them, or a couple people have upset them. And the way the rule of order works is that it can't turn into a personality of bashing people. And so I think the board is right to protect themselves from that publicly. I think a board member said it at the board meeting that I was at on Monday, we're available by email, phone call, whenever. And so sometimes I wonder if it's more the theatrics of how crazy the board meetings have gotten versus, hey, let's really try to solve a problem. Here's my phone number, give me a call, message me, email me. I just think, I hope I'm answering your question.
Yeah, and I think you might remember a few months ago, there was allegations against a board member. And the board called a special meeting, and the board members who were in attendance voted to pass a resolution asking for the resignation of this board member. The board member has not resigned. But I wonder, seeing that, watching that from a distance, because again, you're not on the board, how would you have voted, and what did you think of the outcome of that?
I truly don't know, because the board has other work sessions. Like, I know the consent agenda for things go out either on a Thursday or a Friday, and then they talk about it and ask the questions and then come to the board meeting to do like the voting and the decision making. So I would have needed to see what was going on behind closed doors to come to my own conclusion, and I'm not on the board, so I wasn't privy to any of that information. And I think I'll just leave it at that.
Most families, most parents, most voters don't really care about what happens at the board meeting as long as their kids are safe and they're learning, at school. How do you think PHM is doing with safety as a district?
I think they were ranked either in the top 4% or the 4th safest school district in northern Indiana. I got that flyer in the mail. I'm not remembering the number correctly, but I think they're doing a very good job. We have, our buildings are up to date, and the ones that aren't, I know they just redid the Mary Frank cafeteria, but I know that's not safety, but they're constantly redoing things and making things the best that they can, and I think that they continue to do that with safety. One thing I wish that we had in terms of keeping students, emotionally and mentally safe, I wish we had the resources for more supports in the elementary school classrooms, because I think when you don't have that, a lot of that falls on teachers, and they already wear so many hats. That's another hat that they have to wear.
Yeah. That was going to be my next question. Like, what additional things should PHM be doing? And maybe in the high school level as well. Those kids are going through a lot, and they and the high school is so big. Is there any additional things that you think PHM should implement at those higher grade levels?
I went to Penn, so I actually graduated from there in 2012, and I felt like for as big as it was, if it can feel small because they do such a good job with clubs and having people getting involved, and so you find your group, and then it makes a big school feel smaller. But in terms of at the high school, I know this year they implemented a no cell phone policy, and from what I've heard from teachers, I don't have any data or anything on that, but just anecdotally, it seems to be working. And so I think seeing our high school tackle a problem like that, hey, this isn't working and we need to fix it, that's a good sign.
And for such a big high school.
Yeah, I graduated with over 900 students, and that was in 2012. And people, you see all of the neighborhoods popping up in PHM. People keep moving here, and they keep doing it because it's a good school district. And to that point, we moved. I actually found out I was pregnant in Chicago when we were living there. Went to the first ultrasound like 2 naive parents. My husband had a job offer in Chicago, and we were going to stay there and move into a bigger apartment and just raise our one baby there. Went to the first ultrasound, found out it was twins, and I just said, we have to move back to the area, or to my hometown. He's not from here. And so when we started looking at houses, I decided, I took the lead, I'm from here, and I just said, we have to live in PHM. They have to have the same educational opportunities that I did. So I have a lot of passion for this.
Yeah. I read, and this might be something, with your teacher background. So PHM has pretty good iRead scores comparatively to the rest of the region. iRead, of course, is the test that kids take in 3rd grade that measures are they reading at a 3rd grade level. The legislature just passed a law this past spring that says kids who don't pass the iRead in 3rd grade are at risk of being retained in the 3rd grade, so held back. I wonder, and I've been asking all the candidates, what do you think about that law and holding kids back? And what can PHM do to raise the number of kids who pass? It is higher, the number of kids who pass in PHM, but there is still a significant number of kids who aren't passing the iRead and would be at risk of being held back. So is there anything additional that PHM can do, and how do you feel about that law as it exists right now?
That law is so tricky because while the intent is good, they're trying to make sure that kids are fluent in reading and making sure that they are going to be successful in the higher grades. It can be damaging to self-esteem. On the flip side, when I taught 4th grade in Chicago, I had 4 students that did not know how to read. They did not know all of their letters or letter sounds. And so without some type of measurement, you're going to end up with kids that slip through the cracks, and that's doing them a disservice as well, because from like kindergarten to 3rd grade, you're learning to read, you're learning phonics, you're learning about all of this stuff. And then in 4th grade, you have to read to learn. You're learning social studies, science, even your math problems are story problems that you have to solve. And so if you can't read in 3rd grade, that's a huge problem for the rest of your academic career. So I disagree with the law, but that's out of my scope. I can't change that. I think the answer goes back to my earlier answer of more support in the earlier grades in elementary school, of figuring out where these kids are in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd, and then giving them response to intervention, which, to explain that, like, it's kind of like a triangle. And so tier 1 is the bottom, the biggest part, and that's your whole group instruction that kids should be receiving every day. And PHM, when I was there, they had like a 90-minute reading block. Now, tier 2 and tier 3 are done in your small reading groups, like that are tailored to your needs. So tier 2 is the second part of the triangle, so it's a little smaller, where students are meeting at their reading level and getting, the whole group is grade level, like the grade level content. 2 and 3 is tailored differentiation, tailored to their needs, and that they need to be receiving quality instruction every day. Tier 3 are the kids that have not, that I would say it's the smallest group, and it would be the group that is not passing or is at the most risk of not passing, and they need to be meeting every day in their small reading group, and that's where reading specialists come in and the supports in our elementary schools. We have to be utilizing our response to intervention and funding it and making sure that we have the resources, that it's running effectively, or those numbers will never change.
Yeah. I wonder too, listening to you talk, you have so much knowledge about the classroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you could bring that to the board? Like, does that already exist on the board? That knowledge of what's happening in the classroom? And
so right now there is one teacher on the board, and the difference between that person and I is that I was in college from 2012 to 2016, and I was in the classroom from 2016 to 2020. So all of my experience has been within the last 12 years. I'm doing mental math in my head. So I have been educated trained as a teacher in this era of public education. I taught in this era of public education, and actually I taught at the tail end of COVID, because from March until June I was very pregnant and still teaching, but it was virtual teaching. So I actually have a little bit of experience with that. Now then, once I had the twins in July, I decided to be a stay-at-home mom. But I experienced myself the struggles of trying to teach virtually. And no one has that experience. And response to intervention, that's used mostly in the elementary and middle schools. And I think because to be truthful, there are 2 other teachers that I'm running against, and both of them were in middle and high school. I have a background in general education. I've been trained in methods, math methods, science methods, social studies. Like, I have the full background and experience. And I told you earlier, like, public education is my passion. I was nominated at Ball State for Senior of the Year in Teachers College because instead of doing 16 weeks of student teaching, I chose to do the full year of student teaching, because I knew as a teacher I needed to see what a full school year looks like. In student teaching, most of the time you come in January, the classroom has already started, the ball's rolling, you just come in and teach content. I wanted to make sure I was a good classroom manager. I needed to see the first 6 weeks of school and watch someone set up a classroom so that I could be effective. And I didn't just want to come in and take over the content. I wanted to see, okay, how do I get this off the ground? How do I teach my discipline plan? How do I teach? I have a class library. How do I teach, the checking out process? What about homework folders? I wanted to watch someone teach all of that so I could do it myself and do it good, do it well.
This is another question I've been asking all the candidates. And WSBT did stories on this like a year or a year and a half ago, critical race theory. There has been some anger, some frustration from people who live in PHM, and they've brought that to the board. Asking, is our teachers teaching critical race theory or tenets of critical race theory? And should they be? What are your thoughts? Do you think PHM teachers are teaching critical race theory? And how can parents know? How can they figure that out?
No, I don't think that they are. And I read the WSBT stories and I watched the board meetings when all of this went down, and all 7 of the board members agreed that it was not in PHM. I think there may be outlying circumstances where a teacher may kind of teeter the line, and I think then parents have a right to go in like the chain of command, right? If something happened to my child in the classroom, I'm not going straight to a board meeting. First, I'm reaching out to the teacher, then I'm reaching out to the principal and trying to solve some of these problems at the level of which they're occurring before just running to the board meeting. That's not to say parents are not welcome there. If you feel like you've been wronged and you need to speak at a board meeting, I 100% agree and feel you should, and you should embrace that opportunity. In terms of parents knowing, we do have curriculum nights. I know they did that. You can download your child's curriculum at school or online from their school. And I think part of being an active parent is doing all of those things and making sure, and also making sure that you can trust the school district that this isn't occurring there. And so I think the fact that all 7 board members agreed that it wasn't in PHM is a good sign. I have my own opinions on that. They have changed over time as I've read more and learned more. So what I thought maybe 3 or 4 years ago isn't what I think today. But in order to keep the school board nonpartisan, I choose to keep those opinions to myself.
One of your opponents has said that he is concerned maybe about some of the professional development that teachers might be getting. How much of that professional development impacts the way a teacher teaches and what they teach? Are there legitimate concerns about professional development for teachers and where that their background, the background of the people who are giving that professional development?
Well, you have to have professional development to grow. Teaching is one of those things where it's a craft and you're always working on it and you're always trying to get better. And sometimes your professional development could look like, hey, on this prep, I'm going to go sit in the classroom 3 doors down and watch what this person is doing. And other times it's going to a conference and listening to the presenter. In terms of the backgrounds, we want to make sure that we are getting professional development from experts whose goals align with our goals. And I think everyone's goal should be empowering students and teachers to be the best student and the best teacher that they can be. I don't think any agenda needs to be snuck in there.
And then what would you want to tell viewers? What could you add to the board? What would you want voters to know? What's something, maybe the last thing you want to leave people with?
I'm sorry, it's just crazy running for the school board in the school that you went to and was a teacher. So like I said, I went to PHM from kindergarten to senior year. And then I was a teacher here for a year. I chose to come back. There's a reason I wanted to come back and teach and come back and raise my kids here. And there's a reason for that, and it's because our community is so awesome. And when we have a thriving school district, we have a thriving community. Our PHM's children are a treasure, and I'm excited that my 3 kids, my son's not graduating until 2041. He'll be 2 in 10 days. So we are here for the long haul, and I am passionate. I have such a heavy background in curriculum and instruction and public education that I feel I'm meant to do this, and it would be an honor to represent the people in our community at the school that raised me.
I feel like you're getting emotional.
I am, yes, I am. It's just very surreal. My daughters and I drive around, when we're driving everywhere, we play the game of like, we used to play, we'd look for American flags and like count them and work on counting, and now we look for my signs. And my son kisses my sign every morning when we walk out to the car because it's in my yard, and so it's just, yeah, it does make me emotional.
I'm John Paul. Thanks for watching. Here's another video for you to watch. Also, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel.